Elijah Reeves was 37 years old the morning his wife laughed at a dead man's envelope. The envelope had been sitting on the kitchen table for 11 days, manila, plain, sealed with a strip of packing tape across the flap. His name written on the front in his father's handwriting, which was the careful block printing of a man who had never trusted his own cursive. His father, Winston Reeves, had passed at 68 from a cardiac event, quietly, in the night, the way certain men go, without theater, without a long decline, as if even at the end they were determined not to be a burden. Elijah had driven down to Greensboro to settle the estate and come home with a cardboard box of tools, 3 framed photographs, and the envelope. He had not opened it. He told himself he was not ready. The truth was closer to the thing his father had always called patience with purpose. The understanding that some information changes nothing about today, but changes everything about tomorrow, and that today still needed finishing first. His wife, Camille, had glanced at the envelope on Tuesday and said nothing. On Thursday, she had moved it to the edge of the counter to make room for her laptop. On Saturday morning, while he was on the back porch with his coffee, she picked it up, turned it over in her hands, and laughed. A short, dismissive sound, not cruel exactly, but absent. She set it down and said, "To no one in particular." Probably old receipts. She did not know that inside that envelope was a single folded document that would, in 7 weeks, restructure her understanding of the man she had married, expose the scheme she had been running for 26 months, and cost her every dollar she believed she was about to claim. She did not know that Elijah had already spoken to an attorney. She did not know, because she had never thought to ask, what his father had actually spent 40 years building. Not receipts, Camille. Not even close. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from, and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The last week of October in Greensboro had the particular quality of light that Elijah associated most directly with his father. Not warm, not cold, but precise. The way late afternoon comes through bare trees and falls in long, clean lines across a floor. He had grown up in that light in a 3-bedroom house on Lindley Avenue, and he had spent the better part of his adult life in Charlotte, 80 miles north, but the quality of that October light still lived in him the way certain things from childhood do, not remembered so much as recognized, the way you recognize a key in a lock. He was sitting at the kitchen table of his Charlotte townhouse at 6 in the morning, the envelope in front of him, the coffee untouched beside it. He was a structural engineer by trade and by temperament, a man who by professional habit saw things in terms of load paths and failure points, who did not guess at where pressure would land, but calculated it in advance. He had applied that same habit to his marriage for 3 years, and had noticed in the last 8 months that the structure had a stress point he had not previously mapped. His father had been a building contractor for 41 years in Guilford County. Not a large operation, 5-6 workers at peak seasons, residential and light commercial. The kind of steady, reliable work that does not make anyone famous, but makes a neighborhood. Winston Reeves had driven the same pickup truck for 14 years and eaten lunch from a cooler he packed himself every morning and worn boots that were resoled twice before he retired them. He was the most financially private man Elijah had ever known. He did not talk about money. He did not display money. He did not use money as a measure of anything except what it had cost him to build something that would last. He had told Elijah 2 things when Elijah was old enough to hear them. The first was, what you own and what you show are 2 different numbers. Keep them separate. The second was, the envelope goes to you when I'm gone. Not before. Don't let anyone else open it. Camille had been asleep upstairs when he came home from Greensboro with the box and the envelope. They had been married 3 years and together for 5. And in the first 2 years of the marriage, she had been warm in the way that, in hindsight, felt like warmth toward a destination rather than warmth toward a person. They had met through a mutual colleague at an industry event in Charlotte. She worked in commercial real estate, sharp, socially fluent, the kind of person who remembered every name at a party and deployed them with precision. She had kissed him on the cheek when he came through the door from Greensboro and asked if he wanted anything from the kitchen, and the kiss had the specific quality of a gesture performed for its own record. He had set the envelope on the kitchen table and she had gone back upstairs, and he had sat there for a long time, looking at his father's block printing in the silence of a house that felt different now than it had before the drive. The call came that Friday, 10 days after the envelope arrived. It was from a number he didn't recognize, a Charlotte area code, and when he answered, the voice was a woman's, professional, clipped, briefly confused that he had answered rather than voicemail. She said she was calling to confirm the filing date and asked if Camille's documentation from the property appraisal had been received. He said he wasn't sure what she meant. There was a pause. She said she had the wrong extension and ended the call. He set his phone on the soapstone counter, the same counter he had cut and fitted himself 2 years earlier, a weekend project his wife had called excessive and unnecessary, that he had done anyway because he built things to last, and looked at the envelope. Some things, he thought, don't wait for you to be ready. He opened it. Inside was a single-folded document, a trust summary, 3 pages, prepared by a Greensboro estate attorney named Harold Betts, dated 18 months prior. His father had established the Winston T. Reeves Revocable Living Trust 22 years earlier and had amended it 4 times since. Elijah was the sole beneficiary. The trust held 6 parcels of land in Guilford and Alamance counties, 2 paid-off commercial buildings in downtown Greensboro that generated rental income, a brokerage account, and a life insurance policy. At the time the summary was prepared, the total estimated value was $2.3 million. 18 months of rental income and market performance had not decreased that number. He read the document once. Then he read it again. Then he sat without moving for 4 minutes, which is a long time to sit without moving, and he thought about his father's boots being resold rather than replaced, and about lunches packed in a cooler for 41 years, and about the envelope sitting on the counter edge while his wife made room for her laptop. And then he got up and went to the desk in the second bedroom and opened his laptop and pulled up the joint bank account. His hands did not shake. He looked at the account history. He went back 26 months, which is how far back the portal allowed. The withdrawals were not large individually, $1,800 here, $3,200 there, occasional $5, 000 transfers marked with vendor codes that did not correspond to any bill or service he recognized. He opened a spreadsheet and entered every transfer he could not account for. The total across 26 months was $44,600. He added a column for dates. He added a column for transfer destinations, where those were listed. 3 of the destination routing numbers traced to the same receiving institution. He noted the institution's name. He moved with the same deliberate sequence that defined all his actions. He went back to the trust summary and read the section on marital estate considerations. His father's attorney had included a brief note, unprompted. That read, "Assets held in trust prior to marriage are classified as separate property under North Carolina statute and are not subject to equitable distribution in divorce proceedings." The note was 3 sentences. It had the feel of something a careful man had requested be included for a specific reason. His father had known, not the specifics perhaps, not Camille's name or her routing numbers, but Winston Reeves had known something about the shape of what could happen to a careful man who married the wrong person. and he had spent 22 years quietly building a wall around everything he intended to pass on. Elijah opened a new tab and searched for structural engineering firms that did forensic documentation. He paused. He closed that tab. He opened the contact list on his phone and found the name of the attorney his company used for contract reviews. A woman named Patricia Osei, sharp and methodical, who had once told him during a contract dispute that the thing about paper trails was that they never lied. Only people did. He sent her a text. He wrote, "I need to come in. Not for work." He sent it and set the phone face up on the desk, which was the opposite of what Camille did with her phone, and he went back to the kitchen and drank his coffee cold. Patricia Osei had a conference room on the 14th floor of a building on Trade Street, and she kept it clean and spare in the way of someone who considered clutter to be an argument she had already won against herself. She looked at Elijah's documentation for 11 minutes without speaking, her reading glasses on, a legal pad open in front of her, a pen she had not yet picked up. When she finished the last page, she took off her glasses and set them on the table. "The trust is ironclad," she said. "Predates the marriage by 19 years. It's categorically separate property. She gets nothing from it, not in any scenario." She paused. "The joint account dissipation is a different matter. Under North Carolina statute, that $44,600 is recoverable as marital waste. The question is where it went." Elijah slid a second folder across the table. He had spent 2 nights building it after the initial conversation with Patricia. 2 nights of cross-referencing routing numbers, running the institution identifiers against public records, mapping transfer dates against Camille's calendar, which synced automatically to the shared family account she had never thought to audit for his visibility. He had the institution name, a loan account number that appeared in one transfer memo, and a name, Derek Fontaine, 44 years old, a commercial real estate developer with offices in Ballantyne, whose LinkedIn listed Camille as a professional contact and whose financial disclosure in a 2021 LLC filing listed her as a co-signatory on a development entity called Fontaine Whitmore Holdings. Camille's maiden name was Whitmore. Patricia looked at the folder. She made the same sound Dr. Warren might have made, a small note of professional recognition, quiet and without drama. She was funding a joint venture with him. "From your joint account." "For 26 months, Elijah said. Patricia set the folder down. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said the things she said in the same register she said everything. Level, precise, without theater. "The filing she's preparing, that phone call you received, it's coming. Probably within 30 days. She believes the estate is the townhouse, the joint accounts as they stand now, and whatever you have in your retirement vehicle. She has no idea about the trust." "No," Elijah said. "She doesn't." "Then we file first," Patricia said. "And when we file with the full asset picture, including the trust documentation, including the dissipation claim, including the Fontaine Whitmore entity. She's going to walk in expecting a man with a modest salary and a paid-off townhouse." She picked up her pen. "She's going to meet something considerably different." He stopped at his Uncle Dennis's house on the way home from Patricia's office, his mother's oldest brother, a retired public school principal who had known Elijah since the day he was born, and had known Winston Reeves since long before that. Dennis lived in a brick ranch in Huntersville, with a garden he tended with the same unhurried seriousness he had brought to 40 years of managing difficult situations in an underfunded school system. He was on the back porch with a glass of iced tea when Elijah arrived. Elijah told him the whole of it. Dennis listened the way he had always listened, still, hands wrapped around his glass, looking out at the garden without looking at nothing. When Elijah finished, Dennis was quiet for a long time. "Your father knew," Dennis finally said. "I think so." "He didn't tell me the details," Dennis said. "But the year before he died, he called me and said he was making sure the line held. That's what he called it. Making sure the line held." He looked at Elijah. "He was talking about you. He was always talking about you." He paused. "She laughed at the envelope." "She laughed at the envelope," Elijah said. Dennis shook his head slowly, not in anger, in the particular sorrow of someone who has watched foolishness cost people dearly and never found it surprising, but never found it any less sad. "Your daddy built 40 years of work into that envelope," he said. "She didn't see it because she never looked at the right things about you." He set down his tea. He looked at his nephew directly. "You go do what needs doing," he said. "Quietly, and when it's over, you come back and we'll work in the garden." Elijah went home that night and made dinner and sat across the table from Camille while she talked about a property showing she had tomorrow in South Charlotte. And he listened and asked one question and cleared the plates, and she did not notice anything different because there was nothing visible to notice. He was the same man he had always been. That was precisely the problem for her, and she did not know it yet. 3 days later, he received a copy of the completed filing from Patricia's office, a comprehensive marital estate disclosure with the full trust inventory attached, the dissipation timeline annotated in the margin, and the Fontaine Whitmore Holdings documents appended as an exhibit. Patricia had attached a note that said simply, "Delivered. Now we wait." He did not have to wait long. The response hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning in late November in a conference room at a family law mediation center off South Boulevard. Beige walls and a long table in the specific fluorescent quiet of a space designed to end things. Camille arrived with her attorney, a man named Gerald who wore a very good watch and had the efficient confidence of someone accustomed to favorable outcomes in rooms like this. She was composed, dressed for a negotiation she had already won in her mind, carrying the leather portfolio she had purchased specifically for professional engagements. She stopped when she saw the room. Patricia was at the table with a paralegal. Elijah was at the far end, beside his Uncle Dennis, who had driven down from Huntersville in a pressed shirt and said nothing when they arrived, but had placed one hand briefly on Elijah's shoulder as they walked in. Camille sat. Gerald arranged his documents. He began with the standard marital estate recitation, the townhouse, appraised at $340,000, the joint accounts as currently constituted, Elijah's retirement account balance. He was halfway through the second page when Patricia set 3 documents on the table in front of him, one at a time, in the unhurried sequence of someone who had done this before and knew exactly what each page would do. Gerald read the first document. His expression did not change. He read the second. His pen stopped moving. He read the third, the Fontaine Whitmore Holdings exhibit, and set it down and looked at his client. Camille had not looked at the documents yet. She had been watching Elijah with the careful composure of someone maintaining a performance. When Gerald set down the third document and looked at her, something in his look changed what she did next. She picked up the first page. She read the trust summary. She read the beneficiary designation. She read the asset inventory. She set it down. "This was disclosed in the filings," Patricia said, "for the record. The trust predates the marriage by 19 years. These assets are separate property under North Carolina statute." She paused. "The joint account dissipation claim is for $44,600 in documented transfers to a private entity in which Mrs. Reeves holds a co-signatory role. That is recoverable in full, with interest, as marital waste." Camille looked at Elijah for the first time since the documents had been laid down. The composure had not entirely left her face, but it had moved, shifted from the expression of someone executing a plan to the expression of someone doing arithmetic they did not like the results of. "Elijah," she said. Her voice had changed register, moved toward something personal, something that reached past the legal table and back toward the kitchen and the evenings and the version of the story she had been telling herself. "We don't have to do this like this. We can talk. There are things I should have told you, and I made decisions that—" "Camille," Dennis said. She looked at him. He was looking back at her with the same expression he had used in 40 years of school administration when a situation had progressed past the point where words were going to change it. He did not add anything to her name. He didn't need to. Gerald leaned in and said something quiet to her. She stopped. Elijah looked at her for a moment across the length of the table, not with anger, not with satisfaction, with the clear and final attention of a man who has completed the load calculations and confirmed what he already knew about where the structure would fail. He thought about the envelope on the counter. He thought about the short, absent laugh and probably old receipts. He thought about a man who resold his boots twice and packed his own lunch for 41 years and had spent 22 of those years quietly building a wall around everything he loved. "My father left me everything he built," Elijah said. "And he built it so that it would still be standing after whatever came. He knew about whatever came." He paused. He was right about most things. He closed his folder. He pushed back his chair. He stood, shook Patricia's hand, and extended his arm to his Uncle Dennis. They left together, and behind them Gerald was already speaking in the low, careful register of an attorney telling a client that the outcome of this proceeding would need to be substantially revised. 6 months had passed the way his father used to say time passed when you were doing work you believed in, not slowly, not quickly, but with a specific texture of something being built. The spring had come to Charlotte with the particular extravagance it sometimes managed, the dogwoods along the side streets going white, and then soft pink, and then green, all in the space of 3 weeks. And Elijah had watched it from the back deck of a house in Chantilly that he had purchased outright from the trust in February and spent 4 months renovating, not contracting it out, doing most of it himself on weekends, the way his father had done things. Because doing it yourself meant every board was set by someone who understood what it was for. He had sanded the deck railing on a Saturday in April, while a woman named Jade sat in a folding chair nearby reading a proposal document for a community land trust project she was leading for a nonprofit in West Charlotte. They had met through a structural consultation. She had needed an engineer's opinion on a building her organization was considering acquiring. She had asked good questions and disagreed with him about one load calculation and been right. She brought her own coffee when she came over. She was the kind of person who noticed a thing and said it plainly and then moved on, which was the rarest quality he had encountered in another person, and the one he had come to value most. The Fontaine Whitmore Holdings entity had been dissolved in February, after Derek Fontaine's other creditors, a construction lender, and 2 subcontractors with unpaid invoices, had initiated separate legal proceedings that collapsed the enterprise from 3 directions at once. Camille had lost the $44,600 invested, and whatever she had believed the venture would return. She was living in a rental unit in Concord and had taken a position at a smaller commercial property firm, a significant step down from the one she had left. Her mother had called Elijah twice in January, and he had returned the calls both times, briefly, and said what needed to be said, which was not much. Camille had not called. He had not expected her to. The trust was intact. The 6 parcels in Guilford and Alamance were generating income. The 2 commercial buildings in Greensboro were fully leased. He had taken on a partnership with a small construction firm in Greensboro bringing his engineering capacity to the residential and light commercial work the firm had been doing for 20 years. The same kind of work his father had done, on the same streets his father had worked, which felt less like coincidence and more like sequence. The way good sequences feel when you have not skipped a single step. Uncle Dennis's garden had produced tomatoes in July that split at the seams with their own weight. Elijah had eaten 3 of them standing over the kitchen sink on a Sunday morning, the way his father had always eaten them, with salt and nothing else. He had called Dennis afterward just to say so, and Dennis had laughed, the real kind, sudden and unguarded, and said his father would have approved, and they had talked for half an hour about nothing that mattered and everything that did. The envelope was in the second drawer of his desk, behind the framed photograph of his father at a job site in 1994, sun-worn and squinting, one boot up on a lumber stack, looking at something off-camera with the expression of a man thinking about how to do a thing correctly. Elijah kept it there not out of sentiment exactly, but the way a builder keeps a level, because it was the thing that confirmed when something was true and plumb and worth trusting. Some things, his father had known, were worth the patience to build right. He ran his hand along the deck railing he had sanded, smooth, even, no variation, and looked out at the yard, at the Japanese maple coming in new this spring, at the morning light coming through the trees in long, clean lines. He was not finished building. He was just finished building for the wrong reasons. He was free. He was solvent. He was his father's son. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.